You are now entering a dangerous liberty zone where God-given natural rights are held sacred and exercised. This is your warning. Tyranny, fascism, and censorship will not be tolerated. Ideas will be exchanged freely. Rigorous debate and open discourse is encouraged. If you are weak and your beliefs are fragile, you should leave now. Prepare yourself. We are now live on the Dangerous Liberty Podcast. All right, folks, welcome to the Dangerous Liberty Podcast, where we know the only thing more dangerous than liberty is the lack thereof. Summer, how was your week?
It's good so far.
Awesome. Chris?
Good.
Jason?
It's been all right.
Awesome. Hey, we want to welcome everybody that's showing up now and in the future. Thank you for tuning in. If you're not checking us out live, make sure you join us live. We want you to be part of this community. We want to hear what you have to contribute. We want to hear your questions. We want to make sure we read your comments. John Esmond, welcome. Jason Sponsor, welcome. Jeff Hahn, Chris Bishop, Lloyd. All good, great to see you guys. All of our boys over there on the Lost Boys on Rumble.
All two of them right now.
Two of them. Sweet. I'll tell you what. I still get surprised at the views that we get on Rumble. I mean, we're getting afterwards. We're getting well over 1,000 views on our live streams on Rumble. Almost twice that what we get on Facebook, which is pretty crazy because normally it's about a 15 to 20 to 1 for any of our other content. But tonight we have a very, very special guest and a special podcast episode for you guys tonight. I think it is so important and I was talking to our guest just a few minutes ago, and we've been doing this podcast for a long time, and one of the things that I haven't done, and I really genuinely do feel guilty, is to have more of our Gold Star families on. We always talk about how important liberty is, but we also need to talk about every now and then the price of liberty. And the price of liberty is paid for in blood, thousands and thousands of time over. And those folks, we need to make sure that we're remembering the men and women that we lost, and also making sure that we hear the stories from their family and everything that they've sacrificed for this great country. So without further ado, what I'd like to do is to bring in Thomas and Jenny Feeks, and if you guys will just take a couple of minutes to introduce yourself to everybody. And I just want to again thank you guys so much for coming on. This is it means a lot to us, so thank you for giving us the time and telling your story.
Well, thank you, Gary. Okay, we're gonna have a fight here. Okay, Virginia.
Okay, thank you for having us. We really appreciate the opportunity to talk about Pat and talk about things we'd like to do for the Navy SEAL Foundation.
Absolutely. Again, it's our pleasure. And I think it's an opportunity to remember our fallen comrades and to talk about their life and to celebrate their life, right? I love that quote that you sent. It's one of my favorite quotes from Pat, and he talks about, we don't want to mourn the people that we lost. We need to celebrate their lives. And that's what this episode really is all about. So Thomas, introduce yourself. Tell us a little bit about you, and then Jenny will do the same thing, and then we'll definitely spend most of the time talking about Patrick. And I can't wait to hear his story from beginning to end.
I see Patrick's wife is also in the comments here, Emily.
Oh, good.
Oh,
Hi,
good.
Emily.
Emily,
Awesome.
how you doing?
Yep.
Awesome, Emily. Go ahead, Thomas.
Emily lives down in Tampa, Florida, by the way, so she's checking in from there.
Awesome.
As Gary said, my name is Tom Feeks. I'm a retired naval officer. Spent 27 and a half years on active duty. I was an aviator, naval aviator, mainly flying P-3 maritime patrol reconnaissance aircraft. Had various tours throughout the United States, flew the P-3 through Europe, Pacific, lots of time in the Indian Ocean, Middle East, those types of places. Retired in 2000, November of 2000. And then, as luck would have it, I got a job down at the United States Naval Academy, that initially as the director of the flight screening program. In 2007-8, it moved to Pensacola. I stayed and continued really what I found that where my niche was teaching there in the leadership and ethics department. I was teaching ethics and moral reasoning for about 12, 13 years till I retired in February of 2001. Now I'm happily retired from my second job, doing whatever the boss tells me, thinking I can do whatever I want when I want to do it, but that's not the case.
I can definitely relate, Thomas. Well, Thomas, thank you for your service. We appreciate that as well. Jenny, tell us about you.
Well, I don't know what to say.
Come on.
Well, like any good military wife, you have 27 years of service too, huh?
Yeah, I went
That's
off
right.
to college thinking I was going to be a medical illustrator, but I decided I'd probably starve to death doing that. I figured I wasn't good enough. I wasn't focused enough. So I went into nursing, and in the meantime, I met Tom. We got married in 1976. I'm really bad with dates. And
So that's 47 years for you guys.
I had to take my shoes off to do the math, so I was going to let you guys.
I have a calendar.
he's better at that than I am. And so it's just been kind of a very interesting Navy wife life. I like the moving around, one time, like I really hated to leave Maine. I loved Maine. California was good. The weather was good. Yeah.
You lived in Bahrain.
Lived in
wow.
Bahrain for a while. Yeah. I bought a horse when we lived in Maine, and he moved to California with us, and then he moved back to Virginia, and then he went and stayed with a friend while we were in Bahrain, and then we moved to New York and moved him back down here. So,
what all places have you guys been stationed?
Let's see.
Brunswick.
We were stationed in Brunswick, Maine, which was at the time in the late 70s up until the mid 90s was one of the major P3 bases on the East Coast. Then we were out at Moffett Field, which is just south of San Francisco. Again, was the master P3 base on the West Coast in those years. Both those air stations are closed. As the P3 force, we had 24 squadrons when I was in there. Now they're down to, I think, 9 or 10. And they're all transitioned from the P3 to the P8, which is a more capable airplane. It's newer. And then we spent 2 years in Bahrain, which was pretty exciting 2 years. We were there 95 through 97. So we kind of were in this, I kind of call it a sweet spot. We got there, it was really lovely. After about 6 months, the terrorist thing started to bubble after the Khobar Towers explosion. And then things got more and more heated. But it was still Bahrain in that time, and it probably is still today, a very cosmopolitan country. It had been settled by the Brits. The U.S. Navy had been there since the late 40s. It was the headquarters of the Fifth Fleet. And so the school was excellent. It was a Department of Defense school that had been set up in the mid 60s under the auspice in working with the Bahraini government. The Navy was looking for ways other than just putting more ships in to kind of cement the relationship with the Bahrainis, and Bahrain was looking for a way to entice some of the more senior executives to banking and oil companies and things like that. So to have a school that not only serviced the Department of Defense kids, but other expats, I think we had over 60 nationalities in the school, because if you show up with your checkbook, the U.S. government was going to let you in. So, we only had maybe 400 or 500 DOD kids during those years. There were almost 1,200 kids in the school, most of them being expats. So it was really good for our kids to be exposed to that. Regina was in 2nd and 3rd grade. Pat was in 4th and 5th. So they get he was in 6th and 7th. It just was a good experience for them. And we got to travel as a family. Ginny got to take the kids to Europe a couple of times. We took a big family trip to Egypt, which was, I think we were there for almost 10 days.
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
And it was
That's awesome.
tremendous. We were, three of the four of us were really excited. Pat didn't want to go because he had read in the local newspaper that the Muslim Brotherhood was going to send American tourists home in dog food cans. He didn't want to go, but we had a woman that worked in our MWR department, and she was she was a character. She was married to an E7 that worked in our ran the post office for us. And Violet was probably 6'3". She was a very tall, imposing black woman with a shaved head. And she had gone to Egypt about a month before us and came back fine. So we said, if Miss Violet could do it, Pat said, could you come with us?
Did you guys get to see the pyramids and everything there?
Oh, I tell you, it was tremendous. We arrived late one night.
It was during Ramadan.
It was during Ramadan. And so we got in there and, oh man, it was raining of all things. We got to the hotel. It was 10:30, 11 o'clock at night because we'd gone from Bahrain to Dubai to Cairo. And I'd gotten up about 4:30, 5 o'clock to go running. And I was surprised because the pyramids were like right outside the hotel. And when Regina walked out, and about 9 o'clock, we came back. I didn't say anything to the kids. And when they walked out and she saw the pyramid right there, I mean, it was like in your face.
But it really wasn't as close as it looked because it was so big.
Yeah, but it's huge. And
we
and
were
she
really
was
a little ways away from
she
it.
was just that was worth the price of the trip to see her face.
That is on my bucket list to go see the pyramids. Like all the different ruins all around the world. I've had the opportunity to go see some things down in Mexico, Petra. All these megalithic ruins. I've gone down the Graham Hancock rabbit hole and all that other good stuff. But no, that is definitely on my bucket list. So was Bahrain your favorite duty station?
I liked it because I really enjoyed learning about the culture, and they had a really fabulous heritage museum there that was just fascinating. I just loved going over there, and the people were very willing to share their culture, and Regina's fun because she really liked that. Patrick, he was taking it in, but you didn't know it until years later when he would talk about it. He just kind of acted like he was,
Yeah, but that was his.
How old was he then?
6th and 7th grade, I believe.
Yeah,
he was like 13.
Yeah. But
outside of the military, what do you think the percentage of kids that go out of the country, like how many people get to experience things like that? Like if you're not in the military station somewhere.
Very low.
Before age 13, 14, 15?
Yeah, right?
I would say less than 10%.
10%.
That's probably 5.
1%, I'd probably say.
That's probably more than 1%, but it's low. Not many kids do. So before we started doing Paramount full time, I was working for Department of State, and the last job that I had, I was working for diplomatic security. I was basically traveling to embassies and consulates doing security work, and getting to work with the embassy personnel there, and those folks that were living and traveled so many places. They had like 8 and 9 year olds that were running around with like 3 different languages and been all over the world. It's just such a great thing to expose kids to other cultures. There's no doubt about it. And it makes them appreciate where they come from, I think, a little bit more too.
Yeah. And Regina has actually been back to Bahrain like twice.
Yeah.
She, after her first deployment, she raised her hand when they said, we need somebody to go TDY to the
Carl Vinson.
Carl
It was in
Vinson.
Desron.
And so she got to fly into Bahrain, spent some time there, dragged this other kid that was on the airplane with her out to one of the villages to go see Bollywood, Bollywood movies. She always liked the Bollywood movies, and they came out after dark, and that guy was like, "Oh my God, where are we?" She was like, "Oh, we're fine, we're fine, we're fine." And then she went back on another deployment.
Yeah. Well, when Gridley was over there.
Yeah, so she really
Now-
likes stuff.
To get back to
you guys have 2 daughters, and you had Patrick, right?
no, we have one daughter,
One daughter.
Regina, who does enough for 4 people, and then Patrick.
Gotcha.
But
So before you, Thomas, now you being in the service in your Navy career, did you guys come from a line of a family of veterans?
yeah, I would say so. Growing up when I was a kid, all my dad, all my uncles, scout leaders, even the parish priest, had fought in World War II.
Wow.
So there was that. I mean, I'm talking, I was born in 51. So if I'm in, 7, 8, 9, 10, that's 15 years, into it. And we were still fighting 20 years in here. So yeah, I can't say that those guys, paraded it around a lot or said, you're going to go in the military, but there was this sense of service that everybody had, that was just natural. And so for me, I wanted to be a pilot. I wanted to fly, gray airplanes over blue water, and the Navy looked like the way to do it. And so that's what I did.
That's awesome.
Mm-hmm.
That's awesome.
Well, and his uncle had also
Yeah,
been
I had an uncle that had been a career naval officer,
and
too.
he flew over Cuba during the Cuban Missile Crisis.
Yeah.
Oh wow.
Mm.
Well, that's
Oh, wow.
amazing.
Yeah.
So
I
tell us,
mean,
what was Patrick like when he was young? I mean, I'm always
Oh, bad
curious.
boy.
I kind of expected that.
I feel like in the special operations community, there's a certain type of personality that goes and does these things. And usually that's kind of like where we come from, right? Like a handful as a child.
I'm always curious to see, because there does seem to be almost a stereotype, or at least
Yeah.
an archetype
Yeah.
of folks that come from special operations. They have very similar, I don't know, very similar
Personality.
They're cut from the
personalities.
same
For
cloth.
sure.
Yeah.
And one thing I've always noticed, I don't care who it is, almost everybody in the special operations that I've found, at least in my observations, is that they're that certain personality that, not necessarily to anybody else, but they're always trying to push themselves, always, and I don't mean this in a negative way, but and I'm speaking as much about myself as anybody, but always trying to test yourself and always trying to prove yourself. Mm-hmm. And I'm always curious to hear about others, but I am very curious. What was Patrick like growing up?
Just to reinforce what you said, one of the things the Navy SEAL Foundation does, it has wellness weekends for the Gold Stars, and they break them down: the parents, the spouses, and the siblings, and then children too. But so you get the mothers of these Navy SEALs, fallen SEALs together, and they start talking about their children. And it's like it's one guy, that same kind of cloth. But yeah, I would say, and jump in there, Jen. Pat was always, he wasn't like overly aggressive, but he was certainly out to push the envelope, to do whatever he wanted to do, and it had to be what he wanted to do. So if excelling in school was not exactly what he wanted to do, right. If he wanted to read an entire series of books about the Vietnam War, he would jump in, read it, and remember it. And if he was sitting here now, he could probably quote a chapter and verse. So he was extremely good at that. He was very good at math, although
he would tell you he
couldn't do it, and he ended up failing out of the Naval Academy prep school because he failed calculus. But again, it wasn't something he wanted to do. But he as a little kid, pretty active. He liked doing individual things. And by that, I mean, he liked biking and he liked swimming, as opposed to being in the soccer or baseball or something or anything like that. So I think I was on deployment and my mother and father-in-law were visiting Ginny and they wanted to get him a bike and they were going to get
him a big wheel,
one of those plastic things.
Oh, yeah.
But he didn't want that. He wanted a two-wheeler. So he got this two-wheeler. It was only a 10-inch two-wheeler, so it's pretty small. It's got training wheels, and he's tearing around the neighborhood on these. Got to take these training wheels off. So I'd come home and been home, I don't know, a couple of weeks. And I remember this. It was Easter Sunday. We came back from church, and he says, I need the training wheels off. I said, oh, I'm going to be running around following this little 10-inch bike, my poor back, holding the seat. So I went out, we took those training wheels off, and son of a gun, if he didn't get on that bike and just drove off. And Ginny came out and said, where's Pat?
Because I had gone in to change clothes, figuring I was going to chase, running down the street.
I said, he's gone. He's off.
Just on his own.
I said, did you take the training wheels off? And I said, yeah, they're right here. And so, I mean, and he was about 3.5, 4 years old.
Wow.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Yeah. So,
well, no, because he was riding BMX at 4.5. So he had to have been about 3.5.
Okay. 3.5.
So
then he started riding bicycle motocross and he loved that. Just all that kind of stuff.
And boy, if he didn't do as well as he wanted, he'd take that bike and throw it.
I tell you what, this all sounds so familiar. I didn't know Gary obviously when he was a child, but this sounds awfully
I don't think
familiar.
he's grown up.
You got some time somewhere. You got
I
time.
haven't changed much. If you know me now, you knew me when I was 4.
You just have
much.
adult money now. That's all.
Yeah.
And he expressed a desire as a young guy to go in the military. I think a lot of kids did. He at this point we were actually living on the air station. We were living in base housing. Airplanes are flying over all the time. Maybe that's why he never really cared about airplanes. But he said that he wanted to go into the military. He had crashed his bike one time and had knocked a tooth out. And I had come home from work and the sitter was there because Ginny was working in the evening. And I took him to the dentist on the base and he says, hey, it's just a tooth and stuff. But I took him over to the Navy Exchange and because he wanted a little, I said, I'll get you something. And he wanted those little G.I. Joes, the 3-inch, 4-inch guys. And he says, oh, I don't know which one to get. So we're looking there, we're reading all the back parts, the cards that used to be on. And there was one guy, it was wetsuit.
Well, didn't he ask you who was the toughest?
Yeah, he said, who's the toughest? Who's the toughest? And it said on the back of the card, wetsuit, the toughest guy or something. They keep him in the bowels of the ship. Oh, that was it. Well, now he was going to be a SEAL. So he must have been maybe 4 or 5. So, I mean, and that was kind of, his thing on and off. A lot of guys say that. But by the time he was in high school, I think he really solidified it in Bahrain because we had a SEAL det there. There was, a lot of stuff was going on. He was 12, 13. He'd asked to be certified, get scuba dive certified. So we got him done, did that. And I remember we were taking the course together and he was just being, another guy in the course was the senior Marine for 5th Fleet, who was a Marine colonel. And he and Pat are in the back cutting up like a bunch of second graders. And finally Nick comes over and says, sir, I don't think he's getting this. And I said, Nick, just let him go through. I think he'll surprise you. And they got in the pool and they went through the Don and the Doff and all this stuff. And Nick came out and said, it's like watching the video in reverse. I mean, he's got everything perfect. and that was Pat. I mean, he would act like he didn't give a crap, but everything was put away, and some of the things we didn't want put away were put away. He got us in trouble a couple of times there in Bahrain. So, should we tell the sniper story?
Yeah, tell the sniper story.
Okay. So, you asked if I liked the touring bar. Yes, I did. I was a CO of the base. And that was pretty interesting for me because I'd been an aviator. Everything I'd done was to be the CO of an aviation squadron up until that point. And I knew that I did that job. I was very successful, and it worked out great. And then I kind of said, well, what's next? You know? And then they said, well, you want to go be the CO of Bahrain? I said, no. But I didn't have any choice. No. So we arrived, and we were living out in town. There were no on-base things at that point. The base was pretty much still temporary buildings. Some stuff left over from the 40s and 50s. But the idea was if we had to leave, we could just leave. It wasn't going to leave a whole bunch of stuff behind like we had done in the Philippines or in other places. If the Bahrainis had a change of heart. So anyways, we rented a very nice villa with, one of the walls and had a pool. And right across the street from us was the chief of staff for Fifth Fleet, who was my boss, directly between him and the 3-star admiral. Sure. So the chief of staff invites us over to dinner, Ginny and I, he and his wife, and the admiral, John Scott Redd, and his wife Donna, he was a CO or the commander of Fifth Fleet. Lovely evening. They had only been there maybe a month longer than us, and so the obligatory showing of the houses. And we go upstairs, and the front of the house had a little balcony off of one of the rooms, and the admiral looks out and says, "Tom, there's someone on your roof." And the chief of staff says, "Get back, Admiral. It could be a sniper." And he grabs the admiral, rightfully so. And I look out and I go, "What the hell?" I go, "That's Patrick." You guys have been over there. It's the flat roof with the little wall that's up to your waist. And he's there. He's got his binoculars. And he's wondering when we're going to come home. So the air goes out, and then so I go downstairs and I go out the front door, and the admiral's driver, who's armed, has already got the shotgun out and says, "Sir, get back! There's a sniper on that roof." We go, "That's no sniper. That's my son." So we've been there about a month. Pat almost got his head blown off. He showed admirable restraint, but. So we're laughing about it now. There was no laughing that night.
Yeah, right. I'm sure there wasn't. Especially there in front of the boss.
What was that?
I said, especially there in front of the boss.
Oh, yeah. Well, the admiral took it in stride. Chief of staff, not so much.
That's funny when your son makes gets word. The chief of staff gets word of your son's antics. That's a story for sure. So at what point did Patrick end up joining the military?
Well, we left Bahrain. I went up to be the commanding officer of the Navy ROTC unit at the University of Rochester. And up there, checking in, I met some folks from the Navy League, and they sponsor the Sea Cadets. And so Pat, I talked about it at dinner. He says, I got to join Sea Cadets. So he joined the Sea Cadets. And
which was actually kind of unusual because he wasn't much.
Yeah, he wasn't much of a joiner, but he thrived in that whole Sea Cadet arena. And he got to go to some, interesting summer training, survival school, and the boot camp, and then survival school. And then they had a mini buds training, which he was able to go to a couple of years. and that really set him up. And so he really started to structure what he wanted to do to achieve his goal of being a Navy SEAL. He started running cross country his freshman year. He was a varsity swimmer at McQuaid Jesuit School, high school up there in Rochester. Did pretty well athletics wise. And then my tour of Rochester came to an end. I looked for some employment up there. Things fell through and got the job down in Annapolis. So I moved down and to finish out the school year about 4 or 5 months later, Jenny and the kids moved down. Pat finished his senior year in high school at South River High School here in Annapolis. And then we were kind of pushing him to go to college. He applied to VMI, which he was accepted, but then didn't want to go. And then he was accepted at the Naval Academy, but he was a B type student, and they wanted him to go up to the prep school at Newport, Rhode Island, to kind of get, schooled up on calculus and chemistry and things like that. And he went reluctantly, again, because school was not that, he just saw this as another year that he was going to have to, slog through school. But the carrot, if you will, was he knew that he didn't meet the vision requirements to enlist as a SEAL. I think it was like 2030 or 2070 or something like that.
Bad.
And he was a lot worse than that. He was 2200 or some crazy stuff. But if he went to the Naval Academy, they had started a program to start to laze all the aviators' eyes and the kids that wanted to be SEALs that didn't meet the vision. And their rationale was they felt that they could get a better candidate, because so many guys were immediately excluded because of a physical thing that could be fixed. So we talked him into that. He went up there, and again, weather's lousy. He just, long story short, he got mono, fell behind, failed calculus. You want to jump in, or am I telling it? Okay. I'm going to hear about it when we're
No doubt. You're going to hear all the stuff you got wrong.
Yeah.
No, he did something good. So they asked him to leave. So he came back home. This is now March, April of 2002. No, 2003. And he immediately runs to the recruiter and figures that he'll be able to sweet talk his way in, vision or no vision. Well, didn't work out. So he went to get his, but you want to talk about it because she went with him, get the eyes lazed?
Yeah. We took him over to the local doc that was supposed to be the best at this. And she looked at him and examined his eyes, and she said, I won't, at the time they were doing PRK.
PRK, yeah.
And she said, I wouldn't do PRK on you. She said, your eyes are usually so dilated normally that if we did PRK, you would have debilitating night halos. So she said, I won't do it. She goes, but there is a new thing that I'm getting ready to learn. It's called custom ablation. And she said, let me work with it for about 6 months. And if I think it'll work for you, I'll call you back in. So about 6 months later, she called him. She goes, I think this is going to work for you. So they went on and did the surgery.
No, but there was one other missing piece here because the Navy was not accepting that. The Navy would only accept PRK.
PRK, yeah.
And the reason was because of this ablation, they cut the covering of the cornea, lifted it up, did the thing, and then it goes back. And the feeling was that
that can be displaced.
It could be
So
displaced
yeah,
either
so
through an
I went-
ejection or during a parachute jump or something like that.
Yeah, because I actually, when I went, I had a very similar experience. So I had no intentions of really going to the military, and then 9/11 happened. I was in a recruiting station a couple days later, and that's where I was like, I'm going to go kill some bad guys. This isn't going to happen. So, but I was actually, I think -6 or something like that, legally blind, and I was -10 in one eye and -11 in the other.
Wow.
And I couldn't even get a waiver to get into the military. I had to get a congressional waiver. So I ended up going to a couple of different ophthalmologists, and basically they said, hey, besides him being so nearsighted, his eyes are good. And long story short, I ended up getting in through a congressional waiver, and then much later in 2005, before I went special operations, 2004, before I went special operations, I ended up getting PRK. And I know that was the same thing with us then, was that they weren't taking anybody that did LASIK or any other. The only thing they would take is PRK, because that's the only thing that would grow, that would heal, and you would have basically your cornea would be stable, as opposed to possibly having a flap that came undone.
Right.
Yeah. So he had to do like 6 months.
Well, it turned out I just happened to run into one of the SEAL senior enlisted there at the Naval Academy, and he asked about Pat, and I told him the sad story, and he said, "Oh, sir, we just changed that last month. The aviators aren't accepting it, but we're accepting it for dive." And so I said, "Are you sure?" And he said, "Yeah." So we pulled out the instruction, and sure enough, and so then we were able to surgery and get. He had to wait a year, I think.
Yeah, at least. Yeah.
To get the waiver.
Yeah.
And so, anyways, and then of course that took some time. So by 2006, he's good to go, got all his waivers, and he actually enlisted in May, was delayed entry until late October, and he went up to Great Lakes, graduated, went up to Great Lakes in October of 2006, graduated boot camp in January of 7, went right out to Coronado and started BUDS, finished BUDS in October of 7, and then SQT, and then finished SQT, which is SEAL qualification training, in May of 2008. And by June, he's in Iraq.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So they sent those guys off real quick.
But it was funny. He talked about when the team was already over in Iraq. And so they were sending the new guys, and they, went in there with all their guns and stuff to the airport. What are those? The
big Pelican cases.
The Pelican cases.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
And they flew into BWI here outside Baltimore.
They'll pick up
TSA,
the back.
yeah.
Yeah. So we were able to go over there and see him, and they were kind of laughing because apparently when they got off the plane and they had to take all their pellet cases and everything, and they had all these matching backpacks, and some lady said, "Oh, are you?" I forget what she asked him. He said, "Oh, well, we told everybody we were an adventure racing team." And then he said he was walking. They were walking past this guy who's on the phone, and the guy's going, "I don't know who they are, but they're somebody."
It's always funny when you're walking through the airport where all the Pelican case, and then TSA has to open it up. You get some good actions there.
Yeah.
It's interesting.
Yeah, no, it again, in special operations, you end up deploying, whether it's overseas or going on training missions to other countries as well. You're always told to dress low pro, and then again, you're walking through with all this gun case and everything else.
Yeah. It's really fun when you're It's really fun when you're on your J set and you go into another country, like say Africa or something like that, and then the next country gets you, and that's a whole nother thing.
Yeah. Well, I mean, they were dressed unobtrusively. They were all in jeans, all in T-shirts, hooded sweatshirts, G-Shock watches, flip-flops, ball caps.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's so funny. One time Gary tried to tell me dressed in civilian clothes that none of the special operations guys, you couldn't pick them out. You can't pick us out.
Yeah,
you can't
right.
tell. I'm like, I can tell from a mile away. Like, I don't, no, you can't. I'm like, yes, you can.
You can tell. You can tell.
Jeans and sandals.
It's true.
Yeah.
It's true. So Iraq. So how many deployments did he go on before his last deployment there to Afghanistan?
He'd made 2 rotations to Iraq. He caught the tail end of that one in 2008. I guess they were home by October of that year. So, June through October. He came back. He wanted to do something sexy, like go to breacher school or, sniper school. And they said, nope, you're going to be a comm guy. And he was like, oh.
He was really disappointed.
But then he really did fall in love with that, I'll have to say. And he just really enjoyed being a comm guy. And then the icing on the cake was he became a JTAC. And then he could deliver, as he would say, death from above. And,
Well, I think one of the things that made him realize how important this was, he was an avid reader. And he'd read a lot of books about military operations and was that Operation Market Garden, Bridge Too Far, all those books. And one of the big things was they had trouble because their comms didn't work, the batteries didn't work. And so he remembered all that from all his reading. And so he was really
he was anal about
making
making sure
I almost said that, but
making sure that his stuff worked 100% of the time.
yeah.
And the guys used to kid him about his gear because he was fastidious about it. I mean, this is what they're telling us. I mean, I just knew the way he took care of his stuff as a kid, but he they say that, and he loved gear. He was a gear guy. So, chest rigs, all kinds of stuff, plate carriers, rigging it out. Guys would say he'd be trying to sleep, that hear of the Velcro as he's readjusting all the pouches.
One of the things that he sort of laughed about when he went to his first team, it was a group of very experienced. They'd been there a long time. They had some really rough experiences, and he's in there and he's got his certain way. He's got his vest on and things are arranged and everything. And they sort of laughed at him. And then after they got working with him for a while, he says, next thing you know, they're ordering these things and they're setting them up the way I did. He said, because he felt like he really needed to be able to get the stuff he needed. It had to be quiet. It had to be secure. And so he, even when he was in high school, he would buy some of this stuff and when redesign it, he would take it apart.
Yeah, he
and
did.
believe
He learned
this,
to
he can
sew.
he can sew. So he
Right.
would sew these things back together. He took sewing 1 year in school.
Just so he could design his gear.
Yeah. And so he was, he really.
That picture, I think you have up there, everybody can see it. The guy that's with Pat, that's Charlie Keating. Charlie was later killed in Iraq in
16.
May of 2016.
Yeah.
They were really, close as you could get. And after Charlie couldn't come back for the funeral, but they had a memorial service about a month later. And Charlie came up to Ginny and he just said, Pat was one of my best friends. I lost my best friend. I'm your son now. I'm your son now. And then we lost Charlie.
Yeah. That was really devastating too. I mean, I couldn't believe it. I got this text and from a guy who'd been in the teams with Pat. He'd gotten out, but he said, I heard we lost somebody. I heard it was Charlie Keating. What do you know? And I'm like, oh shit. And then I kept thinking, I could see that he had sent the same message to Tom. And Tom Where had you been?
I'd been down to my uncle's funeral in
And I
Florida.
thought,
In Florida.
and I thought that's all he needs to, pull that up on his phone the minute he gets off the plane. Well, so I'm driving up there, and then he calls me, and he goes, "Have you seen your phone? Don't."
No, I said, if you haven't left the house, don't leave.
Yeah, because he was afraid I couldn't drive. But
Well,
anyways.
after we talked about doing this, and I was putting all of this together today, I reached out to some friends. What I also wanted not only was to hear from you to remember Patrick, but I was also curious to see what his teammates would say about him. So I reached out to some friends, and I want to thank JP Donnell for putting me in touch. But I actually was able to get a hold of one of his teammates that went through buds with him and was on SEAL Team 3 with him, and that was Remy Adelake. And he was kind enough to actually send me a voice recording, shedding a little light on his relationship and what he always remembers about Patrick, and it kind of echoes some of the things that you said. So, Jay, if you will play that for me, I would appreciate it.
Hey, so the biggest thing I remember about Pat Feeks was that, which impacts me to this day, was how much of a perfectionist he was. He was like a gear junkie. His cage was right behind my cage. So we literally, like, if I walked out of my cage, like, his cage was right there in front of mine. So he was always working on gear and working to get his gear better. So much so that I gave him a nickname, Pat Feed Tray Feeks. And I remember every time I would say that to him, he would always laugh and say, "Dude, you're the only one that calls me Feed Tray." And so, but I just always marveled at how he was just so focused about the details as it related to his gear, and he always tried different things and new things, and it was all meant to make him a better operator and a better teammate. It wasn't about himself. It was about how can I get my stuff more dialed in so I could be more of an effective teammate and more of an effective operator. And so that kind of sticks with me today, because every time, like, whether I'm writing something, whether I'm preparing a speech, whether I'm creating something or making a film, whatever the case may be, I always think back to those details and the importance of paying attention to detail, the small details, and striving to be a perfectionist and striving to do things right, not for the sake of myself, but for the sake of the people around me, my teammates around me, whatever the project that we're working on. So that's the big thing that sticks out to me, and that stays with me every day in what I do.
Thanks, Remy.
That was great. Yeah, Remy's been really good to us and supportive of us too. So I'm just so glad to see him doing so well. And
I talked to him for a few minutes today, and he actually just got through. I guess he's doing a documentary on Green Berets, actually. So he's been down at Fort Bragg doing some things down there, and hopefully we'll be able to get him on and talk to him a little bit as well. But fascinating guy. I'd never heard of him before, but he was talking about that. I kind of Googled him, and he's been in some movies and done some things, and so it was great to talk to him.
You read his book? You should read his book.
I haven't. I will.
Yeah, his story is really fascinating. He came over from Africa when he was a young kid. Lived a tough life in Bronx, New York.
Got himself in some trouble.
He got himself out, and enlisted. He had some folks in the military that just went really that, not even the extra yard, the extra 100 yards to really help him out and get him on the right track. And he was a corpsman for a number of years before he's gotten the SEAL teams, and then just did extremely well, and then never looked back. So again, he's a solid operator. And there's Emily. So Pat became comms guy JTAC, deployed back to Iraq in 2010, left in February and was back again by October. And there in November of 2010, he met that young lady right there, young Emily, and they quickly fell in love. And Emily was in the Navy. She was a cryptologist, as I mentioned. She was assigned to Support Activity 1. She had deployed, I think, to Iraq and then to Afghanistan. She was in Afghanistan in 2010, supporting elements of SEAL Team 3 when Pat was in Iraq. She was there when Brendan Looney, another SEAL who had gone through buds with Pat, was killed. His helicopter crashed. So they met in November of 2010. Emily was up for orders, and they were going to move her, I think, back to this neck of the woods, NSA, where all good CTs go. Okay. And they said, well, you know, we're kind of engaged. And they said, you got to be married, kids. And so they went and got married. Vegas and got married.
They're like, we'll fix that.
And then, so that was in March of 11. They got married. And then Emily deployed. She deployed to the Philippines.
April.
In April. Yeah, like a month later. Pat did get to visit for a couple of weeks. They had I guess a late honeymoon. She returned to the States in I think the second week in December. And then Pat, so they had another 2 weeks together, and Pat deployed the 28th of December to go to Afghanistan.
Yeah, so they only had 3 weeks together.
Yeah, I mean, was a whirlwind courtship, and although on paper it shows they were married for almost a year and a half, it was a very, very short time, unfortunately, that they had together. But
But we've stayed close with Emily, and she has remarried to a really nice guy. We're very happy for them.
Yeah.
And
he's a solid guy.
He sure is. And he swims the Tampa Bay Frogmen swim every year in memory of Patrick. So that's the thing I think that really endears him to me, is that he is perfectly acceptable, happy to accept Pat's part in her life. Some of the guys she had dated were like, well, I can't compare with him, and I don't want you to talk about him. And so that was really hard for her.
Sure.
For him to, be very accepting of Pat's place in her life, and know it's good for her, and it makes us very happy that it worked out well like that.
And it's not like Pat was not a big blustery guy. He didn't come in and I'm a Navy SEAL. Right. He was pretty humble, but Summer, you probably know the guys. I mean, there's a presence.
Yes.
That when they come into the room, they don't take the air out of it. But their presence dominates it.
Yep.
And that's the way Pat would come, and you go. But he would do that even when he was a lot younger too. I mean, he just seemed to be the center, not because he was demanding it. He just seemed to, I'm going to say,
draw attention.
Yeah, it just was there. There was a presence.
Yeah,
it sounds like whoever was in the airport that made the comment kind of sums it up perfectly. Well, I don't know who they are, but they're somebody.
Exactly.
That sums it up perfectly right there.
Exactly. Yeah. And so I'm sure that Emily, I'm not seeing the comments, but she would say that he was he was somebody.
But it's interesting. We get messages from people on his memorial page, people that knew him, and they talk about how, well, like Brimmy said, how professional he was, but he was also very humble. And one of the guys talked about that he was a comms guy. I guess he was in charge of all the equipment, and he said he'd get there in the morning and there'd Pat be waiting in his office for him, because he wanted to get the best equipment for his guys. And he wanted to make sure that they had the best stuff and was going to be the first one there to get it. And he
Right.
said, nobody else did that. He said, he'd be there before I got there. He'd be sitting in my office with the lights off. And so he, but then I think he was the guy that probably told Pat, now, if you want something, what you do is you get what do you call that? Like a log of Tabasco.
Copenhagen.
Of Copenhagen and the chief and give that to him, and then you'll get whatever you want. So
Right.
Well, Jenny, you just mentioned. I'm sorry.
No, go ahead, baby.
You just mentioned Pat's memorial. I know you guys have been doing quite a lot of things since Pat's passing in his honor. I don't know if you guys want to talk a little bit about some of the things you've been doing and are currently doing to carry on Pat's legacy.
Yeah, and I also want to say, folks, down in the description below, folks, there's a couple of links. Number one, there's a link to Team Cry Havoc, which Jenny will talk about in just a second, but also to the Navy SEAL Foundation. And one of the conversations that we'd had started to touch on before we jumped on here was everything that the Navy SEAL Foundation did for you guys after after everything took place. And we would definitely like to hear about that. And folks, if you'd like to donate or you'd like to find more information about the Navy SEAL Foundation as well, definitely go check out those links, go find some information. And I also want to talk a little bit about the charity event that you guys had this past week. I know there's a lot of folks that are subscribers and our clients that would love the opportunity to participate in some of those events going forward as well. So take the floor and you guys talk a little bit about, actually, before we get to that, let's talk about kind of leading up to when you guys heard that Patrick had been killed. I'd kind of like to hear what went on with that.
I'll let you.
Yeah.
If you feel comfortable.
No, we can do it. It's just again with Pat, nothing is straightforward. I'm not trying to be funny.
Yes, you are.
Yeah. So I guess that's the only way I can keep from crying. So here we are. It's Thursday, the 12th of August. It's about 7 o'clock. I'm getting ready to go to work. And I get a call from Emily, and I'd seen the news. I'd seen that there'd been a helicopter that had been shot down in Afghanistan. And, we'd had breathtaking moments before. I think it's almost 6 months earlier when they were doing workups. He called me and said, hey, tell you, we're going out on a helo tonight. We're going to be doing some night casts and recoveries, and I'll call you tomorrow. I'm really busy. And so they lost a helo that night, and I was like, oh my gosh. But it was, a helo off of one of the ships, and it happened before they were going to do their exercise, which was canceled. But those kind of things, happen.
Well, and it wasn't that long before that. Was it just a week before, or a couple of days before?
Yeah, there'd been another helicopter.
Dave Orson.
The previous Sunday, there'd been a CH-47 that I guess somehow clipped a blade and tipped over. And the guys from SEAL Team 3 were on it, some of them. And nobody was, they were just shaken a little bit. The helo, I guess, was a write-off, but the aircrew was okay. Nobody was, no broken bones, cuts, scrapes. And Dave Warson, who was with Pat when it was shot down, was on that helicopter that flipped over. Anyways, Emily called me, and it may be up and down a few things, and Em can jump in if there's any other things. But and I said, you know what? Lots of airplanes. Let's not worry about it. She goes, well, he was supposed to call me. And I go, oh, okay, great. So I'm sitting in my office, but this time I go to work, and now it's 8 o'clock, and that's 5 o'clock West Coast time. I call my daughter, and I said, where are you? And she goes, well, I'm just about ready to get on the ship. And I said, look, do me a favor. I know you think this is stupid, but talk to the XO, tell them you need the morning off, go back over to the other side to the amphib base and go to SA1 and just check on Emily because she's going to work and something happened and we just so you're together. She had her own job to do. But the combat systems officer on that ship, which was the Rents, was a young lieutenant whose husband was the XO of EOD-3. And she didn't know what happened, but her husband got a call at about 3 a.m. to go to work. And so she said, you better go over there. And so Regina crossed back over to the bridge. And she says, oops, I'm in front of SA1, lots of activity. They're going to take my phone. And they did. And that was the last thing I heard about at 8:30. So I know it's useless to call because it's a secure space.
Right.
And so I'm waiting. And I guess it was just before 11 o'clock. So almost 3 hours. No other info on the the news outside of the initial story. And I get a call from Emily's CO, who is Chris Dunbar. And he said, Captain, he says, I got the girls here, Regina and Emily. I've cleared it with my boss, who at the time was Colin Green. He was Group 1. And we've lost a helicopter. Patrick was on the manifest. Officially, he's Dustwind, duty status unknown. But we know that initial reports from the guys on scene are that everyone is lost. He goes, and I talked with Colin, and he felt that you deserved to know as soon as possible.
Well, the girls
were, tell my dad he's got to know.
They said that when they walked into the spaces there, that there was all this activity, everybody's running around, and then they saw Emily and Regina standing there, and she said everything went like quiet. And then once they kind of figured that Pat was gone, Emily and Regina insisted that they call Tom because we'd
had the back and forth, and then of course you get no report at all, and you tend to assume the worst. So again, to this day, I'm tremendously appreciative of now Admiral Green, he's Deputy SOCOM, and Chris Dunbar for making that judgment call and kind of stepping out of the normal CAICO system, which caused us all a lot of, believe it or not, angst later on in the day and through the rest of the weekend as people started pointing fingers. And you think
it's like,
cut the shit out.
We don't need this.
But on one way I understand because mistakes can be made and things are released to the press and all that other stuff. But I think the girls, accurately conveyed the message that this was a Navy family and it was family business.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
So then we had the HR director to work, took me up to where Ginny worked, about 30 minutes north at the hospital.
Yeah, it was weird. The girl at the front desk said to me, there's some man out here wants to see you. And I said, well, who is it? I don't know, some man. And I said, my first thought, having heard the news about the helicopter that had gone down and the fact that Emily had called me that morning too. And I said, I'm not going to worry about it until I know I have something to worry about. And I said, are they in uniform? She said, no. And I thought, okay, it's probably one of the maintenance guys because, we had a problem in the back. And so I walk out there and I'll never forget seeing Tom walking towards me. And he said, it was Patrick. He's gone. And I probably made a little bit of a scene, upset my patients. upset the doctors. And I heard Dr. Repka say, it's her son. Because I told him that I'd gotten this call from Emily about the helicopter. And I said, there's been other helicopter crises. I'm not going to worry about it until I have something to worry about. And I'll just never forget hearing him saying, it's her son. And so because I was crying and being a little hysterical, we went to the back of the office there. And the first thing one of the nurse midwife said to me is, do you want me to give you something? And I said, no. I said, I'm going to have to deal with this in real time. She said, you want me to give you something to sleep? And I said, no. If I'm meant to sleep, I'll sleep. And I think that people really were surprised that I wasn't on something.
Sure.
But I know some of the moms really, they took stuff and ended up struggling with it. And my feeling has always been that by taking stuff, you're just delaying working through it.
Absolutely.
And so we did that without any meds but I just remember just being like in shock and practically non-functional. I remember Tom, you didn't drive? I did. Did you drive? Yeah. See, I don't remember. And got home and I felt like all I could do is just sit. And Tom's calling people and I'm thinking.
No, actually, we got home and by that point it's probably about 1:30. The Keiko crew showed up about 3.
I remember you being on the phone before.
I might have called. I had called my cousin Ed, and I might have called Neil, but I didn't start it.
It just seemed like a lot.
Until I did. I mean, the rest of the day I was on the phone, but the Keiko guys showed up. The official Keiko, Rob Calhoun, Kevin Stark, who was a senior enlisted SEAL, Chris Mansig, lieutenant who worked for me, and then the Catholic priest showed up and spent about an hour with us. And then we just, you're trying to notify family and stuff, and then
you were notifying. I was sitting, just vegetating.
The command, the SEALs. The first guy after that was Russ Giraldi, SEAL commander who was stationed in DC. He came out and spent time with us. And then by 8, 9 o'clock that evening, Pat's friends started to show. Will DeFrancis, who at that point was a Marine, he was down at a fast team in Hampton. Mikey Deal and Christine Toronto both came up from Camp Lejeune area.
Yeah,
Christine was a Marine, and
he knew them from the Naval Academy.
The Naval Academy. And then, as we mentioned, by the next day, both Emily, Pat's wife, and Regina, our daughter, and some other of Pat's close friends started to arrive, to do what needed to be done. We talked a little bit earlier about why we, have these fundraisers and try to raise money for the Navy SEAL Foundation. Navy SEAL Foundation is there to support, the Navy SEALs, active duty, and retired. They do have a whole series of programs of engagement and scholarships and transition programs. But what they did for us at that point was that they provided funding for Pat's teammates. And I think the Navy SEAL Foundation paid for both Regina and Emily to fly out that evening. And so over the next 3 weeks, as we stepped through this before we were able to bury Pat at Arlington, we had anywhere between 6 and 40 team guys, and they stayed in local hotels. And Navy SEAL Foundation picked up the tab for that. And that allowed us to form connections and friendships with our sons, brothers that we may have heard of or didn't know, but we knew them by the end. And it provided us solace, during that 3-week period. And it has lasted us the 11 years since. And the bonds have even grown stronger. And for that, we'll be eternally grateful.
Yeah,
It sounds trite, but it's true.
And what I did was I wrote a letter to the guys in the team and asked the CO to read it to them after they all got back from deployment, because they, a lot of the guys are still over there. And one of the things that I told them, I said, I felt like we were standing on the edge of an abyss. And it was those guys that came and stayed with us that drew us back away from that abyss. And I'll be forever grateful for that, and the fact that the Navy SEAL Foundation was able to help bring them to us. And part of it was all the stories they told about Pat. I mean, stories that, like, they were talking about what an amazing JTAC he was. He was the best JTAC, and how he, if so he didn't know the answer to they said all the guys would go to Pat with their questions, and if he didn't know, he'd find out. They'd say, a lot of guys will say, oh, well, I don't know, but I'll find out. And then you never hear from them. They said Pat always would find out and come back. And they were talking about how, as they were waiting for the airplane to bring him back to the States, one of the guys said, well, what are we going to do without Pat? He was the one who knew everything. Who are we going to ask now? And, we wouldn't have heard those stories, probably any other time. But they were there, and it was just amazing. And what surprised me, because Pat was really disappointed when they made him a comms guy. And they, when they were talking about how good he was the best guy. And was like, well, that's really funny, because he was really disappointed that he was made a comms guy. And they were like, really?
Yeah,
but
he never told anybody.
Yeah, he never expressed that disappointment to anybody else. But
well, that speaks to his character, that even though it wasn't his number one choice of job, he took it and was the best that he could possibly be at it, in support of his teammates and his own personal just work ethic. So
yeah, and the other story that's kind of funny about this is his friend Warner, who was a Green Beret, was also made a JTAC, and a comms guy, JTAC. And Pat was all excited. Warner says he was all excited that he had somebody to share all his technical discussions with, and he'd talk about this and he'd talk about that. And he'd say, well, what do you think, Warner? And Warner says, I don't know. I just turned the dials. Pat goes, didn't you read the manual? He says, Pat, the manual's this thick. Nobody reads the manual but you. Warner's
the other kind of, as we heard all these stories, if Pat would tell us something, well, everybody has a nickname or a call sign. So it was interesting to try to sort out who's who from what Pat would say, so-and-so, and then the story would be told, and oh, that's you. So,
Yeah.
And then the other thing that Pat did that we didn't realize at the time is if there was some stupid ass thing happened to somebody, he said, there was this guy, and he'd tell this stupid story, and the guy would do something, and then the guys were telling a story about the stupid thing that Pat did. He'd be telling it on himself, but it'd be
Some other guy.
Some other guy.
That's funny.
Emily says that you need to tell the bull story.
Oh yeah. We mentioned, I don't know if it was probably in the preamble, Herb Thompson, who he and his fiancee, Corey Burton, have been kind of our backbone for a lot of these fundraisers, especially the wine tasting, since Corey is the IT genius. And but Herb was the senior enlisted in an ODA, and Pat was attached to them on numerous occasions as the JTAC to provide additional support. And I guess
JTACs are a godsend on an ODA.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And Pat and Herb, I guess, became pretty good friends. But anyways, this I guess tests the limit of the friendship. Pat was walking across this field, and the Afghan commandos had walked through, and I don't know where the other guys were, but Pat was kind of strolling through this open field, and he noticed that the Afghans started to run, and he looked, what's this? There's a bull that's chasing him.
Yeah.
And so Pat says, that bull's going to run over there. So, but nope, that bull starts chasing after Pat. And he says, and he starts running, and the bull starts chasing him faster and faster. So he turns around and he shoots it.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And then he fell off a wall at the
It
end
was
of the
like
field.
a terrace.
Yeah, a terrace thing. And he fell off, into this poppy field. And he said he lost his headset and his rifle's askew and the bull is dead.
Right at the edge of the terrace.
the terrace. And he's just, I think he said, I just went ass over tea kettle over the wall and laid there and just realized the absurdity of the whole thing. Somebody had to pay for the bull, and Herb was the guy. It cost him out of his ODA funds, which I guess are unlimited.
Yeah, op funds, yeah.
I think you paid
They're not
$200.
Yeah, I
unlimited.
think
They're
he paid-
not
I think he
unlimited.
paid
Just
But they
just
do get
throwing that out
refilled
there.
monthly.
Yeah, they get refilled, but they are not unlimited.
Yeah, and then they were upset because one of the bullets had pierced the gut, so
Gut.
he wasn't even good to eat. So
Yeah.
they were a little upset.
One of the bullets.
So I think he ended.
If a bull's chasing you, I'm telling you what, you're giving it all of the bullets.
All
I
the
promise you,
bullets.
Chris.
Oh, oh no, I would do the same thing.
Yeah, absolutely. It's all the bullets. Yeah.
No, that's awesome.
So again, it's one of those things. Pat had told us that story, and then it was later. I think I mentioned it to Herb, not realizing that he was a player, and he kind of gave me the, "We're not going to pay for that goddamn bull," you know.
That was well worth it. we all ODAs, but the government in general, we've wasted a lot more money on less things. That's
Yeah.
for sure.
That's
Yeah,
bull.
for sure. For
Yeah,
sure.
but you guys had that
pay
hard-
for a lot of stuff when you go to places.
We that was Thursday, Friday, Saturday. I think on Saturday, I was just exhausted, and I laid down, and my phone rang, and this guy says, "Hey, my name is Pat Spihar. My son was killed a year ago. He was a Navy SEAL." I said, "Yeah, man, I know. I'm exhausted." And I kind of was short with him, and I kind of hung up, and I lay there in the bed, and I said, "Big mistake. This guy's throwing you a lifeline, and you just kind of, like threw it away. Like the guy on the roof when God saved me, and God sends the helicopter, and he says, 'No, God's going to save me.'
Right.
Mm-hmm.
I'm waiting for God to save me."
Yeah.
And Pat Spihar calls, and I throw it away. So I called Pat back, and sure enough, his experiences going through what we were going through, a year earlier, his son, Nick, was killed on the Extortion 17 shoot down in August of 11. And so, he kind of became my mentor on how to get through this and not, fall into insanity. So that opened a lot of windows and doors for me on the, you got to stay connected. You have to stay connected. You can't let it go. or you can't just hold it in. You got to let it go, and you got to talk to somebody about it, no matter what it is. And so that was a lesson for me. And Pat and I have stayed good friends all these years, and it's kind of taught both Ginny and I think, to reach out more than we would want to, and not to be insulted when people don't really want it, but gently pushing until they do, if you know what I mean.
Part of it is like when we went for Cantor.
Yeah,
After
Matt
Cantor was-
Cantor.
Matt Cantor was killed. We went down to his memorial service and introduced ourselves to his parents. And I can understand this because I was like in such a fog after Pat died that there were people that I knew that I couldn't even recognize. I mean, it was awful. I really thought I was losing my mind.
Yeah, Matt was a young SEAL, just 21, was shot in a firefight. It was his first deployment, a brand new guy, shot. The bullet went in through right under his plate. He continued fighting, they said, for about a half an hour, and he didn't say he was wounded. Nobody checked him, and he ended up bleeding out. But a true hero, just fighting. So that was in October of 12, shortly after Pat. And his family had no background at all in the military. He had expressed some interest in it, and they said, "No, you're going to college." And I think he went to college for one day
year.
and went whatever, and then enlisted. And so here he is, through buds, Navy SEAL. His mother didn't know that he jumped out of airplanes. It was.
His parents really didn't have any idea about what he was doing.
Sure.
And when we introduced ourselves at the memorial, I thought they're not going to remember that they even met us, but they did. It surprised me later when.
So we stayed in contact with that family, and again, Matt was in Team 4, and the Team 4 guys, just like the Team 3 guys, have been incredible. Taking care of his family.
Yeah.
He had a little brother who was 12 years old. Matt was everything to this kid. He's got a lot of brothers. And again, it's just, and nobody's shouting from the rooftops, but you see it and you hear it. And again, it's heroes taking care of families. And that just makes it work. And nobody told them to do it. Nobody says, "Okay, you're assigned." No, they picked it up and ran with it. And just like the guys that are incredibly close to us.
Well, I know I can't express enough how much I appreciate you guys sharing this story with us, sharing Pat with us, sharing his life story with us. You guys were clearly amazing parents, and you have raised two great patriots. For the parents out there, that I think parenting is such a huge part of American success and potentially American failure in the long run. What are some of the things what is your advice to parents out there that, would aspire that they raise kids that end up being just like your kids?
Oh, that's a hard question. People have asked us that before, and
you can't make another Pat. But one of the things that you need to do, and I kind of laughingly said when you asked, what was Pat like, and I said he was a bad boy. Little boys will push, and little girls too. I mean,
sure.
We'll push the envelope, and you need to set limits. And a parent, you're the one that sets those limits. You don't need to, stifle them. And when they show, they want to take off and ride that bike without their training wheels, or they want to take dance lessons, or they want to do something that captures their interest, you need to encourage that. But at the same time, that you need to know, limits. And sometimes it's hard. I know that we lived in Rochester. We lived on the west side of town, which was more rural. On the east side of town, where Pat's high school was, a little more affluent. The kids were having, big parties every Friday, Saturday night, and Pat always wanted to go. And I kind of was torn. And I think when he got a little older, maybe even before he got into the Navy, he kind of thanked us for setting those limits, because he said, if I went over there, I would have been drinking, smoking dope.
Oh, yeah, well,
doing other things. I mean, not that he didn't do that anyway, but
And I would tell him every time, I'd say, you get me the name of the parent and their phone number, and let me call them and make sure that this is okay, where you're going. Well, I never got the names. I never got he didn't go.
So
Yeah.
again,
Go
ahead.
I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, what you said is true about setting limits, but also not stifling. We have 2 boys in the house, a 13 and a 9-year-old, and
And a 40-year-old.
and a 40-year-old. But, as for me, I've always been a fearful person. I'm a self-proclaimed scaredy cat. I don't like roller coasters. And
Very
I don't
risk averse.
I'm very risk averse. I don't like
Well,
roller coasters.
I'm the same way.
So raising my 2 boys, I encourage them to go out and do things. And the mom in me sometimes wants to be like, no, you're going to get hurt. Don't do that or don't do this. But, our 9-year-old, he loves to ride dirt bikes and he loves to go out shooting with his dad, and he wants to jump higher and run faster. And, and he's always been that way. And I remember the first ride on his dirt bike when he first got it, when he was 4?
4, yeah.
He had never been on a dirt bike before in his life, and never
Has it
touched.
been that
motorized
He had
bike.
never
He-
touched one. He didn't
he
even
could-
know how to ride his regular bicycle without training wheels. But he was determined to ride this dirt bike. So, I'm standing in the yard, and I'm just, the mom voice in me is screaming, stop this right now. And
So-
sure enough, he goes flying off into the trampoline, and, he wasn't hurt, but gets right back on and goes again. And it's been so fun to encourage and watch that. And even, our older son was a little more risk averse like mom, and still is, but as he's gotten older, I've encouraged him, go ride the roller coaster. Don't be a scaredy cat like me, and so it was very well said, we definitely set those limits and set the discipline and set rules, but at the same time, they're boys. You gotta let them go do
to
those
push
things.
themselves a little bit too.
Yeah.
And talking about your story about Pat on the bike reminded me of Noah.
Yes.
So he'd been wanting a dirt bike forever.
Since he was like 2.5, 3.
And he still hadn't ridden a regular bike without training wheels. So I brought this bike home that I got from a friend.
Dirt bike.
A dirt bike. And I started setting it up. I'm like, son, I was like, you haven't even ridden your bike.
Well, no, he did the first ride around the house, and I almost had a heart attack.
hold on.
And then
Yeah.
and then
so
you're like, wait a second.
I was like, you know what? I was like, you need to be able to ride a regular bike before you ride a dirt. I know that's a far leap. But I was like, you need to ride it. And it wasn't, he went and got his bike. We took his training wheels off, and he was riding that bike in less than 8 to 10 minutes.
Yes.
30 minutes later, he was back on the dirt bike, riding around the house like he'd been riding it for a year.
Yes.
But yeah, pushing those interests. But again, I think it is important to have discipline and to parent. And sometimes parenting is really hard.
And it is. And I think your mom, you would have my mother-in-law, who was a very strict disciplinarian, would say to Ginny, you're too hard on Pat. You're too hard. And she would say, if I'm not, I'm going to lose.
Yeah, I was like,
it's a battle. And,
so you had to keep a tight rein on him or he'd be out of control.
and
Yeah.
again, I'm not, that's just what boys do, especially when they grow up, to be the kind of guy that you're going to depend on, to do the dirty jobs that we ask these guys to do. That they've got this, the drive, the competitiveness, the thing to push the envelope, that needs to be nurtured.
Yeah.
But at the same time, they have to have the discipline to hold that in check. The ability to be emotional, to run out and do something that scares the living daylights out of you, and then come back and calm down and hug your girlfriend or
I think there's a
You learn that how to
nece-
calm down.
I learned it from you.
That calm down part? I don't know about that.
I think
Well,
there's
it's
a necessary
because-
natural aggression in boys. And I think current society is looking to stifle that and label it as bad and wrong.
Mhm.
But that natural aggression is needed. And like you said, you just have to be disciplined enough to know how to control it.
Well,
and it's with girls too.
yeah.
You know,
100%. I have
it's
a wife
really-
that has natural aggression.
Yeah. You,
Love you,
have,
babe.
you have to establish that kind of discipline early on
Mm-hmm.
when they're little so
Yeah.
that they know you're serious when they get
Right.
older. I'm going to segue this into another story, but where I worked in the doctor's office, the moms would always want to feed their kids. And then they'd leave a mess in the exam room, and guess who had to clean that up? Because they'd just go. So I finally said, put up signs, please don't eat in the exam rooms. Well, and you think, really? It's kind of like, didn't you ever get told not to eat in the bathroom? So, it's kind of the same way as far as I'm
I
concerned.
mean,
Sounds,
Come on.
sounds kind of gross.
Yeah, so I would tell them they'd go to feed their kids, and I'd say, please don't feed them in the exam rooms. Well, how am I going to control them? And all I could think is, that's not going to work when they're 16.
right here.
Mhm.
So, but apparently Patrick took me seriously when I told him that he was going to be in trouble, because one time Tom was away. I don't know where you were, but Pat called and said, now he was 21, and he called, he said he worked at the bike shop and he was going to go, the guys were going to go have dinner somewhere. And well, by the time he got home, I was asleep, and then woke up to hearing him retching in the toilet. And I went in and I looked at him and I said, well, you obviously drove home drunk. Well, first, you're going to clean that up when you're done. And you obviously drove home drunk. You could have had an accident. You could have hurt somebody else. You could have wrecked your chances of being a SEAL. There's going to be consequences. So in the morning, I told him, I said, that bike race you were going to go to this weekend, you're not going. Oh, Mom. Rah, rah, rah. So he calls me at work. He goes, well, what if I go anyway? And I said, well, if you go, that car is in my name. I'll report it as stolen. Oh, the other thing was, he said, well, if I go with Jim and he drives, I said, let's put it this way. If you decide to go, when you come back, you better find another place to live. Well, he didn't go. But
I don't know you very well, Jenny, but I don't think you were bluffing.
Yeah, right.
Well, that's the
well,
thing.
he didn't know either.
Well, he knew that there'd been enough times through his life, and not to that extreme, but he
Sure.
knew that when she says something, that she was not to be trifled with,
Yeah.
as I have learned.
No. No, I think that's so important, especially like you said, if you are firm with your kids when they're young, and I was, Summer and I, we disagree on a lot of things, but we always saw eye to eye on parenting. And that was, we're not going to sit there and count. We're going to tell you once, we're going to tell you what those consequences are. And, if you violate that, then you're going to receive exactly the consequences that we told you. And I just always remember, even when the kids were little, and again, we may have spanked Jackson and Noah
Maybe two or three
times.
I could count on one hand each.
And it was obviously very, but the thing was again,
It's more traumatic for us than them,
yeah,
I think.
like, oh God, it killed us. But I just remember, we'd even be out at restaurants and stuff, and our kids were 2, 3, 4 years old or whatever, and like our friends would be like, how do you get your kids to behave? I was like, well, we spank them. We know that, and they know that if I say, "Hey, son, if you're gonna act like a crazy man, you're gonna get in trouble one way or the other."
Yeah.
There was no question about it.
Even to this day, we have, other parents that are around us in one way or the other, and they see us interacting with our kids or see our kids, they come out and help with the business stuff or help at the range or, or just see how our kids act around us and how we interact with them. And they're like, we need to send our kids to your house for training. And I'm like, well, you
should have done that about 2 years ago.
So much more pleasant.
Yes.
And there's a real freedom in discipline, a real freedom in discipline.
We never had to worry about taking
so
our
restriction.
kids anywhere.
Yes.
Yeah.
But it gives you exactly because you have citizens.
We've
citizens
taken our kids to
homes,
very
of your nation.
solemn occasions like funerals and things like that when they were very small, and it was never an issue, and people were just amazed because they knew to behave.
Yeah.
Well, my theory is this. Everybody needs to have a dog, and they have to go to dog training class to learn to control their dog.
So that they know how to parent.
Because
this is before they have children.
Before they have children. Because there's training things that you do with the, you usually make the correction and then leave it alone.
It's very similar. I mean, I used to always tell Summer that even before we had kids. I was like, there's 2 things I can't stand: undisciplined kids and undisciplined dogs.
Yes.
And they come from the same parents. No.
Well, there's the truth.
Yeah.
Whether you like it or not.
Absolutely. I think we turned this into a Jordan Peterson or something. No, that's awesome. No, again, I can't thank you guys enough for coming on here and sharing your story with us. And I think it's just so important. And I think, this is something that I definitely want to turn into a regular thing where we hear. Number one, we remember our heroes and celebrate their lives. And on top of that, again, the whole point of this podcast and what we do now is talking about liberty and the importance of the Second Amendment and the importance of freedom of speech and all the things that I feel like are under attack. And they're all the things that I fought for, the people long before me have fought for, Patrick fought for, all the great things, all the things that make this country so extraordinary and so great. And there's so many people that take those liberties for granted and will allow them to be, slowly eroded away. And, I just don't think that if we hear more often about the sacrifices of our men and women, that we would allow that to happen because they gave everything. You guys have given everything. It is a lot easier. It would be a lot easier for me to give my life for this country than to lose a son to this country. And, just even preparing for this and talking with Jenny today and texting back and forth and doing the best I could to learn about Patrick. I just got, very emotional about this. So,
yeah, this was hard to listen. This was hard. I had a lot of thinking backwards as well.
Yeah,
during this, a lot of teammates lost, a lot of things happened.
And again, I thank you for raising the son and the daughter that you guys did. And I want to thank Patrick. I want to thank Emily and all the other Gold Star families out there that have, that is the real ultimate sacrifice. And I know this conversation, even preparing for this, just definitely hardened my resolve to make sure that we don't let those sacrifices be wasted, because I'm very fearful of what's going on in their country. And I think, again, I know just talking to you, Jenny, very briefly a couple of weeks ago, we started to edge off into politics a little bit. But, I think we need to guard our freedoms like we guard our life. And again, I want to thank you. I want to thank you for your sacrifice and all that you've done for this country, for your service, Thomas, for Patrick's service, and everybody out there that's given so much for this nation. I think everybody out there needs to remember that.
Don't forget Patrick's sister. Thank you for your service and her sacrifice as well.
Absolutely.
Yep.
Yeah.
And go ahead.
I was just going to put in a plug. Regina, she made the decision that surprised us all to go to the Naval Academy. I think she did that because Pat didn't, because he found out. Really, the thing that just really grabbed her is, the camaraderie of being in the service. That was something that I think is extremely important to her. So she spent 9 years as a surface warfare officer. She was 5 years on ships, and then was assigned to Naval Special Warfare, supporting the SEAL teams. And then sometime around 2017, about 7 years in, she had decided that she wanted to swap to the medical field. The Navy said, "You're too senior," but she's never one to take no for an answer. So she's tracking towards to get into physician's assistant school. She made the decision to leave active duty, affiliated with the reserves, went to them with her, plan, and they said, "Nope, you're too senior." So she stayed in the reserves, started school, and then found the Health Services Commissioning Program, which is a path for E6s, E7s, corpsmen, for commissioning. But in the instruction, there was a limited number of students direct accessions at a school. So she called back up to the Bureau and said, "Hey, I want to apply for these." And they said, "You can't, you're an officer." I said, "Well, it says in school, it doesn't say, what your employment is." And they relented. They let her apply, and she was accepted. But they said, "Oh, you got to resign your commission." She said, "Okay," which I don't think they ever expected her to do. So she resigned her commission, enlisted, which got her pay and allowances going to a PA school, which made it a lot easier for her. When she graduated and passed her boards, which was within a month, she was recommissioned back as a lieutenant in the Medical Service Corps, and she's assigned to the 2nd Medical Battalion down at Camp Lejeune, providing services to the Marines. So she's had kind of a interesting, but again, her service, while different than Pat's, is just as important, and she just never takes no for an answer. So we're very proud of her.
Yep.
And that's why I said, when you talk about little boys being, tough to handle, she was the easiest child to handle. We never had any problems, not a one, until she went to the Naval Academy, and then she was the smartest person on the planet, and we were the dumbest.
Yeah, we got 2 of those in the house right now.
Yeah, well, that happened. So, anyways, Regina,
a 9 and a 13-year-old that have it all figured out already.
Yeah.
It's pretty crazy. Well, let me ask you this. What would be your advice, if you had any, to again, I guess, what is your advice to Americans out there that want to honor the sacrifice of all the men and women that we lost? What would you say to them?
Be worthy of that sacrifice. Don't let these hard-won freedoms evaporate for trendy, flighty causes.
Sure.
Don't curtail freedom of speech because you don't like it. If I don't think that men should wear a dress, they can do whatever they want, but I can say, I don't. It doesn't make me feel comfortable to see guys walking around in dresses. Don't take away my ability to defend myself because you're afraid of it, or because of the irresponsible actions of a bunch of, young, undisciplined people. Here we live just, 30 some odd miles south of Baltimore.
Mm-hmm.
A murder rate, we're closing in on almost 290, I think. I don't know what it is. It's damn close.
It's a lot.
Cars are being hijacked. Thousands of cars are hijacked
like
this year.
10 and 11-year-olds.
And it's
PG County.
11-year-olds that are doing it because we had to pass a law that you can't, send anybody under 16 to jail. So they were using the younger kids to do the dirty work. It's insanity. People say, "Oh, new things." No, the old rules of civilization will apply. What worked for my grandfather and his grandfather and his great grandfather, as far as being decent people, still apply today.
Yep.
Doesn't change because people want to wear dresses or want to wear pants or whatever. Those things are unchangeable. They're facts, the unalienable or facts of life, as Rush Limbaugh said. Some things never change, and you have to use those rules apply. Those important things you have to cling to. You have to make sure that we keep those freedoms. That we're the last nation that has those, and if we lose them, it's going to be a millennia before somebody else will get the balls to go out and do it again.
Yep.
No, I couldn't have said it any better, Thomas. Well, folks,
I want to jump in real quick, just
Yep.
a couple of quick reminders. I know Gary mentioned earlier, we touched on some of your work with the Navy SEAL Foundation and how having that foundation there and the support they provided after Pat's death just really made a huge difference to you guys. And you guys have since formed your Cry Havoc team to fundraise for the Navy SEAL Foundation. And I know you guys do a lot of work with that. And Gary mentioned earlier, you put the links down in the description. I thought of something while we've been sitting here. Obviously go donate to the Navy SEAL Foundation, the Green Beret Foundation, support these foundations that support these Gold Star families and support these operators. But I thought of something while I was sitting here, a really easy way to support that we take part in. If you shop on Amazon at all, which I know 99.9% of people in America do, there's a program called Amazon Smiles where it's free to enroll and you can donate a portion of, Amazon will donate a portion of whatever you buy to the charity of your choice. I have ours set to the Green Beret Foundation, but you can easily go set yours to the Navy SEAL Foundation. And, it's no money out of your pocket, and Amazon donates on your behalf just automatically from every purchase. So
I didn't even know that.
I didn't
Yeah.
know that. That's interesting.
that's a really cool, way to give back. And
Good job, Jeff.
it's thousands of dollars a year that
Wow.
end up, at these foundations, and it's
and you don't
automatic.
Yeah. It's
on
no
top
cost.
on top of the act of giving, on top of the act of supporting
right.
that you would want to do. So
Huh.
Yep.
That's interesting. Thanks for that, Summer.
Yeah.
I had no idea.
Yeah, I
I
had
am
no
a
idea
wealth
about
of
that either.
information.
So Google like Smiles or
Just go to your
And-
Amazon account, and there'll be like in the account, or sometimes it's up at the top. It'll say
Yeah,
like
it comes
Amazon
up on the
Smile.
banner on the
Yeah.
top.
oh, okay.
Yeah,
Wow.
Amazon
Yeah.
Smile, and you just set your account to enroll in that. It's
Sweet.
free, and then you choose the.
Yeah, you can
charity
probably
of your-
find it or put in your charity.
I guarantee you 95% of people doesn't know about that.
Yeah,
Yep.
no, I would.
Yeah.
I definitely didn't know.
Yep.
Well, Tom and Jenny, what else what are some other ways that you're aware of as far as that people can give, or any other thing any charitable causes that you guys are involved with along those lines?
Well, the other thing that is of real interest to me is like service dogs for disabled and wounded. I have a friend that has she is on her second service dog now, and she works through Canine Companions for Independence, and they breed their own dogs. They know where they came from. They really work at having dogs, like they have bred out their prey drives so that they don't like suddenly chase off after a squirrel.
Sure.
So that's another organization that
Summer's still trying to breed that out of me.
and there's several others. Hero Dogs.
Yeah.
They named a dog after Pat. But yeah, those are the other organizations besides the Navy SEAL Foundation that I like to support.
Well,
And-
that's great. And like I told you guys before, definitely anything that you guys are involved with, anything that we can help with, reach out to me and keep me on, CC me on some emails or whatever else. We'll do everything we can. We'll push stuff out via our newsletter, via social media, whatever we need to do. We'll get Chris out on the corner with signs.
I just need to put in a plug for the Tampa Bay Frogman
I was
swim.
about to say, what's your next thing coming up here?
Yeah, that's in January, and you've got the link there for our team.
Yep.
And last year, our team raised over $80,000, just our team.
Wow.
And, hopefully, we can do the same.
Yeah, I think the swim got close to $1 million.
Yeah, I think they were over $1 million.
Yeah.
But yeah, the link's on there. They can go in and donate either just to the team, or they can pick their swimmer. I'm not. My name's in there as a fundraiser, but I'm not swimming, so.
You know, as you
I'm with you,
mentioned,
Jenny.
there's so many organizations. If these don't really, scratch your fancy or whatever, touch your fancy, look around. One of the other charities that I've worked with a little bit is Gold Star Teen Adventures, started by Trent Soldheim. Just provides exciting things for the sons and daughters of fallen soldiers and airmen, Marines, sailors. They go camping, hiking, scuba diving, all kinds of neat stuff, shooting events, things that young people, it captures their imagination. It keeps them focused, helps them focus on where they need to go. That's good. And then another organization that I've worked with, and I met these through another Gold Star SEAL father. It's Faraday's Troops First. Faraday, the golfer, kind of is one of the major fundraisers for this, but they had a tremendous program that worked from about 2009 through 2019, which was called Operation Proper Exit, where they took wounded guys back to the battlefield so they could kind of walk off on their own terms.
Yeah.
They made, I think, 21 or 22 trips, 10 or so to Iraq, and then another 10 or 11 to Afghanistan. I had the opportunity to go in 2017. And it was a initiative that they had working with the Resolute Support folks they wanted a Gold Star to go to kind of work or show the Afghans how we treat our Gold Star families, where they just give them a couple of bucks and then say adios, not much better.
And they don't give it to the wife.
Yeah, not much. Well, that was the other problem. Not much better than they do for their wounded service guys. So to see our guys come back and treated with such honor and respect, I think it opened their eyes. I don't think it, caused a massive sea change of how the Afghans do business, but at least it opened the eyes of well, that's all gone to shit.
Well, it's got to start somewhere. At least you're showing them what the standard looks like.
Right, exactly.
And self-reflect a little bit.
Yeah.
And we were over there, like I said, in 2017 was a trip I was on. So the Invictus Games were going on. That was a big deal. They had a team that they were sending. So that touched. And so they were sending 6 guys. We had 6 wounded that were on my trip, or I was on their trip. But it was just really inspiring to have these guys meet with soldiers in the field and tell their story. Just great stuff. So again, there's so many organizations doing good stuff. And Troops First is since they're not going back doing proper exit, they've shifted their focus to PTSD and also traumatic brain injury, which is seeming to become more and more prevalent or demonstrating a greater prevalence in the special operations community.
Well, I think we're realizing even the things that we didn't consider before. For instance, I know, just being whether you're in a SEAL team, whether you're in an ODA, you're constantly eating charges. You're constantly shooting everything from AT4s to Carl Gustavs and all those things. We're now learning the deleterious effects that those actually have on, every time you're doing that, you're getting a concussion.
Right.
It's just a fact.
One of the guys
and we're
that's
starting to figure that out.
Yeah, one of the guys that's leading the charge is a gentleman by the name of Frank Larkin. Frank was a SEAL, and then he was a Secret Service agent for a lot of years. His son was a SEAL, hard charging E6, #1 guy in the community. Comes off of had been a breacher as well as an 18 Delta. And Ryan went back to the training command and was teaching breaching, taking a lot of shots to the head. And suddenly you get the #1 E6, performance drops off. Oh, he's drinking. Well, he was not married. What are you going to do when you're a 27, 28-year-old kid living by yourself? You might have a couple of drinks. Anyways, long story short, Ryan ended up leaving the Navy, probably one step ahead of, some adverse circumstances, not his fault. Ended up committing suicide. Again, Frank had one of his things was, he wanted to have his brain autopsy. He found he had, tremendous damage, not just from getting blown up overseas, but from the repetitive exposure, just like he said, the breaching charges and 50 cal and Carl Gustavs, all that crap going off in your ear. And we've got this great helmet technology, but that doesn't stop the damage done to that soft brain. So
it doesn't, as when you have blast waves like you do coming off of high explosives, all those things you listed, again, all those things have severe effects, and we're just now smart enough to realize how dumb it's making us.
I also think that the problem in special operations that you have people too tough to
100%.
go seek out help as well,
100%.
Especially in the special operations community. It's kind of that mentality.
No, it absolutely is. That's one of the major problems. Is it's too many people let themselves get too far gone before they realize what's going on, and then they think they're alone, that they're ashamed of it, and I've been there, definitely, without a doubt. So, and one thing, and this is not in any way plugging us in any way, but I just want to let you guys know. So, primarily what we are is a training company. We have an 800-acre facility that we have access to, where we do our training for driving, firearms, all those things, and any of those different organizations that you listed. If they're looking for a place, we would love to host them out here. We'd love to get them out here. We have ranges. We can take them driving. There's all kinds of things we are wasting resources in not offering those services to fellow veterans, to different mentoring programs where I would love the opportunity to help other veterans, help their kids, get more people involved, and do anything that we can to help veterans and their families. So, definitely look at us as a resource. And, we're right outside of, our facility that we use is out in Summit Point, West Virginia, about an hour and a half from DC. So, we love the opportunity to do anything like that. So put our name out there, and if people, I say put our name out there, let people know that if they need a place to do those types of things, we'd be happy to, and we'll make sure they're taken care of. And that's all I want to say on that.
Great. Well, thank you so much for having us.
Yeah, thanks for letting us have this opportunity to kind of talk about Pat. We do love to do it. It keeps his memory alive for us. And it's, if we can just reach out and touch someone else to, if they need to get a hold of us, you can put us in touch, and be more than happy to talk to anybody that is struggling. Again, I'm sure that you said you get a lot of folks watching the podcast. Communication is important. Just like when Pat Spihar reached out to me, and it took me a while to realize how important it was to connect. Being connected is tremendously important, because you don't want to be that guy that is suffering, feels alone. because then you start looking for that temporary solution to a very permanent problem.
And folks,
Solution.
for those of you out there that are watching this nice, if you know a veteran or you are a veteran and you are suffering from PTSD, from depression, and you don't think that anybody's going to understand where you're coming from, or you think that you expressing those feelings or not even being able to express your feelings, because that's where I was in a lot of this. Like I knew there was a lot of things going on, but the point is that you're not alone. There are thousands upon thousands of folks just like you. Please reach out to us, reach out to an organization. I know from personal experience, the VA is probably not the best place to reach out to, but you can definitely email us, call us, whatever it takes. Make sure you reach out. And I just want you to know that Paramount Tactical Solutions is definitely a source for you. I will personally talk to you. Anyways, so there are people out there that genuinely care about you and do, and the Feeks do, and there's lots of organizations that are set up that are looking for you to make sure that you are not feeling alone in all this. And again, you lived because of other people's sacrifice, just like Patrick's. So do not squander that by drinking yourself to death, medicating yourself to death, or killing yourself. People have given their lives so that you can live and you can enjoy your freedom and you can enjoy a future that, even though it doesn't feel that great right now, folks, there are brighter days ahead, and you're gonna look back and you're gonna thank God that you didn't make all the wrong choices. So don't squander those sacrifices, and reach out, because we all need help sometime. It's just the reality. Thomas and Jenny, I can't thank you enough. Thank you so much for sharing your story, for sharing Pat's story. I thousands of people, I hope, see this later on and hear this, and they're going to be inspired by his story. And again, I really appreciate you sharing it. I don't even know what else to say. I want to say thank you 1,000 more times is what I want to do. But
no, thank you for giving us a forum, for supporting us, with the goodies. Gary engraved a knife for us, and then was able to give us a really great knife that
A sharp tool.
a sharp tool that made some tremendous donations Sunday afternoon when we had our wine tasting event.
We just now have to figure out what we can call a gun without calling it a gun.
Yeah.
A freedom stick.
Freedom stick.
Freedom stick.
Because obviously they weren't looking at the pictures, but
but they were going by the words.
So, but again, thank you so much.
Like I said, the next time that you guys do something like that, we'll push that out to our newsletter, and we'll make it available on social media too. And I know there's lots of our viewers and subscribers and things like that would love the opportunity to donate. And we want to help in any way that we possibly can. So we appreciate the opportunity.
Great.
Folks, again, thank you so much for letting us use your forum and your hall, and thanks for the boys and your crew back there. We really appreciate it.
Nope. Well, we appreciate you guys. Thank you for sharing. You guys stay tight, and we'll close this out, and I'll talk to you a little bit afterwards. But folks,
thank you so much.
Again, we appreciate everybody that is watching this. We appreciate everybody that is watching this even in the future. Share this, share this story, share Pat's story. It's just important that we every now and then stop and recognize and the sacrifice that has went into the freedoms that we enjoy every single day. So again, we always appreciate y'all. I know we didn't take a lot of questions tonight. We didn't read very many comments. I was reading them. So you're definitely not left out, but we'll definitely get you back in on the action next week for sure. We got long range coming up this weekend. I'm really excited to see you, Jeff, out here.
And then next weekend, we still have some slots available for high performance evasive driving, the most exciting course you'll ever take. Well, I don't know about that, but
it's definitely one of the most exciting courses you'll ever take. There's no doubt.
No,
about
I just
that.
didn't want to negate your long range course coming up this weekend.
Well, I won't be there, so it's not the most exciting.
Yeah.
Long range level 1 sold out.
Long range level 1 is sold out with a wait list. There's pretty much no chance you're going to get in that one, but you can get into high performance evasive driving.
We may add another one before the end of the year, so we'll reach out to the folks that are on the wait list and see what date might work for them. We want to try to get everybody in. We got some exciting news for coming up next year, and we will get the 2024 training schedule up as soon as we can. Folks, is always a nut roll trying to coordinate. Well, no, it's a matter of coordinate with other instructors, coordinate 100%. With training facilities, and then
Coordinating us.
all these
Getting
things.
your vacation set up, then
Oh,
planning
yeah.
around it.
'Cause
Right.
I
Right.
take,
I mean, I
I
get
take
it.
vacation,
He's on
Chris.
84 weeks of paternity leave.
Hey, baby.
So, all right, folks, thank you for watching. We really appreciate y'all. If you need anything, you know how to contact us. Make sure you like, subscribe, do all the good stuff, share this stuff. But until next time, stay armed, stay ready. We'll talk to you soon.